Welcome to George and Jane YouTube video channel of adventures and hobbies. Please subscribe and like, comments welcome. Don't forget to browse the playlists.
Hi YouTubers, this is my basic setup, and I don't have a Radio Shack as such. This is sort of set up in the garage, so I can listen on VHF and UHF on the repeaters. I've got my G90, which is my main radio actually, because the FT101's in the bedroom and I just use that for listening. Here's my homemade amplifier, which is a PA70. It's in a plastic box, pretty crude, put together. Now I've replaced the MOSFETs. It's working fine again. It's actually giving me slightly more power than it was originally. But I've actually purchased a new amplifier, and I'll just go outside to show you. Okay, so here's the new Minipa HF power amplifier I purchased. It's 200 watts, and it depends on the power on the voltage you run it on. It doesn't come completely assembled. You have to do quite a few soldering, and I'll just go over some of the soldering you have to do. Right, let's take the top off. Okay, so what have you got to solder? Well, it doesn't come with any wire solder to the circuit board, so you have to solder the SO239s onto the board, so the ground and the output, the ground and the input. You have to solder those on. You have to solder the fans, twin fans, onto the circuit board. You have to solder the power input socket to the board, the on-off switch to the board, the LED indicator to the board. So I have to solder all of these on. You also have to solder the resistors onto the board. You also have to solder in the main MOSFET transmitting module onto the board. You also have to supply and heat sink compound, and you also have to secure the ferrites from shaking about. So it's not that easy to do if you're not experienced. You've also got to solder your power connectors and things like that, and your PTT connectors. Now once you've done that, you have to set the bias, which is quite difficult to do, and it depends on the power you want to run, the input power you're putting into it, the output power, and the other things you have to do. Now the unit is designed to run at 13.8, 24 or 48 volt, and depending on the voltage you put onto it will determine how much power you can get out. So if you run it on 13.8, the maximum power you're going to get out is 100 watts. If you run it on 24 volt, the maximum power is 200 watts, and the maximum power is 300 watts on 48 volt. So don't assume because you purchase it as a 200 watt amplifier it will give 200 watt on 12 volt. It won't. So there's a fair bit of soldering and messing about you got to do. If you're not familiar with soldering, I wouldn't advise you to make one of these. And there's very little information on it, and there's no information about setting the bias. But that's all I was going to cover off in this video. All prices. If it's fully assembled, including postage, you can pay anything from 150 to £200. If it's not fully assembled, you have to do some assembly yourself, you can get them as low as £103. So it's worth bearing in mind if you're good at soldering. There's no low pass filters in these cases, and I am only going to use it on one band, which means I can build a filter for it. And so thanks for watching. A couple of things I forgot to mention with relation to this. You don't get a fuse, so you need to put a fuse in, obviously the power feed, an inline fuse holder, but there's not one inside, and you don't get any feet to stick on the bottom. Luckily I had some. So once again, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like.